What's going on, everybody? Nick here. Welcome to the most comprehensive video on scraping in Make.com currently available on the internet. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about web scraping in Make to make a big splash either in your own business or in the businesses of the companies that you're working with. So you don't need to be a web developer to know how to web scrape. Instead, you're going to watch this video, you're going to learn the 80-20, aka you're going to learn the 80% of stuff in 20% of the time. That will allow you to scrape the vast majority of all static and dynamic websites out there, both in Make.com and then using something called headless browser scraping, which I'll show you in a minute. The real value here is that you'll be able to connect like any website, any scraping source, anything really to your Make.com flows. And if you combine it with what I've taught you in previous videos, you'll essentially be able to make every system known to mankind in Make, which is quite incredible. In order to do this, I need to show you a couple of things. And now I don't want this to be a very detailed, like technical, extraordinarily nerdy sort of video. I want this to be something that's accessible to the vast majority of you, regardless of where you are in your Make.com journey. But in order to really get it and to really get that 80-20, we're going to have to cover a couple of computer science concepts. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start there in a Gamma slideshow, and I'm going to explain these concepts. And then while I'm explaining and after, we're going to move back over to Make.com, and I'm actually going to run you through them all in this scenario editor here. So the things you need to know in practice, from top to bottom, you need to know about the two different types of websites, static and dynamic, and the differences therein. You need to know a little bit about parsing and how it works. And then from then on out, I'm just going to scrape the websites live in front of you, both static and dynamic, and I'm just going to do it so many times that you'll have no choice but to learn how to do it. This is how I learned how to do this. I just looked over the shoulder of a friend of mine that was quite good at this stuff. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I basically hammered my brain into submission until I knew everything that I needed to know about scraping. I pattern matched it, essentially, and that's what we're going to do with you too. So let's start with the two types of websites. Let's start with this little bit of theory. Essentially, some websites are statically generated, and others are dynamically generated. Now, I'm going to talk about those just in a few seconds, but just keep those in mind. They're static websites, they're dynamic websites. But if we take one step further back, what the hell is a website anyway? Well, websites are made up of HTML, H being hypertext, hyper, T being text, M being markup, and then L being language. But what the hell does that mean? Essentially, this hypertext markup language is just a convention that a bunch of people happened to agree on about 30 years ago. A bunch of people got together, shook hands, and I think the guy's name was Tim something, which I mentioned in a previous video, but he invented this hypertext markup language just as a shared set of symbols that everybody from then on out, if they wanted to put something on the internet, would use in order for it to be rendered nicely. If you think about it logically, why do you need one unified language? Well, it's because if you want to build infrastructure that'll just work on every computer, work on every browser, you need to make sure that the data is being represented in the same way, right? So it sort of makes sense. Now, because the web builds on itself, we've used HTML ever since. When HTML was made, all of a sudden, you know, a couple of months or weeks or years later or whatever, some person would make some change to it, or they'd create their own coding library that would add on to HTML, do something cooler. And so since HTML was the beginning, basically everything else has just been building on top of it. And so now we have all these crazy frameworks and we have all these styling languages and all of these different approaches. But at the core, these approaches just output HTML because HTML is what everything else runs on. Now, HTML is the code, but code is for machines. It's not what you see. I'll give you a quick example. If we go back to our scenario editor, if I don't know, I'm just going to make an HTTP module here, the get a request, and then I'm just going to right click here and then I'm going to press inspect. This is going to open up a little window on my right-hand side here called the Chrome Developer Tool Console. And the real value in this isn't, like, I'm not going to run you through this because this is not pretty complicated, but the point that I'm making here is just that everything on this website, like literally everything on this page, is actually HTML. And if I scroll through it on the right-hand side here, you'll see that as I scroll through some portions, you'll see that portions get illuminated, other portions don't. And that's because the code here actually is referring to a specific element on the page. This code, div class equals IMT iPanel space in style, whatever, this is actually like being rendered by my browser right now as we speak. And it's adjusting how the page looks. If I change this little style parameter here, say I want it to be 150, you see how it has some downstream effect on the module itself. Now, that's the code. It's not for people. What's for people is this, right? The stuff we see on the left-hand side. The right is code, that's for machines. The left is for us. So in order to convert that stuff on the right into the stuff on the left, your code, the HTML, it needs to be rendered by your browser. There needs to be some process that takes place. And that's really all browsers do. Browsers will take in HTML, they'll take in code, and then they will do some process on it. And then they will convert that into what we see on the left-hand side here. So the job of Chrome, Safari, Netscape, Internet Explorer, if y'all are still with me, is to read the HTML of the web page and then to turn it into something pretty for human beings. So that's that. Now we need to talk a little bit about clients and servers. And I've mentioned this in a previous video on HTTP requests. If you guys have watched that, you'll already know all about this. But just to reiterate, your computer is a client, okay? In order to access a website, it needs to send a request over to a server. This is an HTTP request, a hypertext transfer protocol request. And what happens is it sends a request to the server, and inside of that request, it says, hey, how's it going? I want to get the full HTML of this website. Can you send it to me? Can you send it to this web address? And the server, just because they speak in a very specific protocol and all this stuff's been worked out many, many years ago, says, okay, great. And then it sends the HTML back to your computer. Then it's rendered in your browser, as we mentioned earlier. And then because your computer screen is made up of a bunch of pixels and there's some relationship between the pixels on the screen and the area placement of the HTML on your browser, that is what allows you to visualize them and, see elements on the page and drag things around and exit out of them and that sort of deal. So we need to understand client-server terminology because it's used all the time in web scraping. And I just want to make it clear that there's nothing complex about it. Your computer is the client. The server is just some resource out there on the cloud. Really, it's just some big rack which is running your website, more or less. Let's talk a little bit about these static versus dynamic websites, because now we know everything that we need in order to make this work. Static websites are very easy to scrape. I scraped them in my previous video. I've scraped them hundreds of thousands of times by now. And I can build a scraper for a static website in less than 30 seconds flat, which I'll show you in a moment. Dynamic websites are a bit harder, and make.com doesn't support them natively. Okay, you can't natively scrape a dynamic website using make.com. You need to use a third-party platform. Luckily, most of these third-party platforms work with make.com, so you can just drag a little module in, connect it to that third-party platform, and basically the rest of your flow is the exact same. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do both, because both are important. Now, in terms of what static and dynamic actually mean in this context, all a static website is it just means that there is literally a file somewhere on a hard disk somewhere, right, on that server, with all of the HTML of the website. It's static because it doesn't change. It just exists. And what happens is when you send the request to the server just says, oh, okay, great, we got this file. Just take the file. Here you go. It's the same file every time, basically, which is why it's static. It's not changing. These are easy to scrape, as you can imagine, because all you have to do is you just type in the URL, which stands for Universal Resource Locator. You pump it into your make.com request module, and then it goes and it grabs the website. So if I were to do this live in front of you, I said 30 seconds, right? I got a couple of other sections here, but let me zoom in. If I wanted to get the data of my own website, all I would do is change this to raw, change this to JSON, leave everything else the same. Then I right-click and I press run. And if I zoom in here and go to data, I have all of the HTML of the website available to me now to do stuff with. I wasn't kidding when I said it was easy to scrape a website with make.com, especially if it's static. If it's a dynamic website, it's no longer just one HTML file somewhere on a server. What it is the website is a set of rules. It's usually rules in a different programming language. And what happens is you will send your request. Your request will include some information about who you are, the type of browser you're using, some information you're requesting, whatever. And then the server will take that information and then it will apply it to the big set of rules. And then it will generate HTML anew, essentially, and then send it back to you. Now, because the HTML isn't there, because it's something that first of all, it takes a little bit of time, although there's a big debate on what's faster, server side or server generated or static generated. But first of all, it needs to be generated. But essentially what that means is when you make the request with something like make, you don't actually get you don't get all of the data. You get a little thing that says JavaScript is not enabled for this browser, or, there's nothing at this resource, or you just get like sort of an empty website. And so you can't actually scrape those in make.com. I can't just go back and do that for you in like half a second, unfortunately, but I'll still show you a way to do so and to solve that problem for you. So that's the difference between static and dynamic. If you know that, you know more than 99% of people do about web scraping on Make. The next thing I want to talk about, and really the last thing I want to talk about before we can actually jump into this puppy and start scraping. Let me just move these around a little bit. It's bothering me, is parsing. So when you scrape a website, notice what we did back there. We typed in my website, leftclick.ai, then we pressed run. And then what did we get? We got this. This is just a bunch of HTML. Now, HTML is nice and all, but as we mentioned, it's not for people. It's for machines, right? It's for our browser. It's to structure the website and all that stuff. Realistically, if I'm going to leftclick.ai, which is right over here, my website, and I want to scrape something, I don't actually care about scraping the HTML. What I want to scrape is, I want to scrape the page links. I want to scrape the description. I want to scrape the testimonials. I want to scrape the pricing, right? I want to scrape the case studies. That's what I care about. I don't care about the HTML. The thing is, it's not what I wanted to do. Let's go. Ooh, man, we got a lot of tabs open. So in order to do that, you need to pull out the data from the HTML. You need to turn it into some type of structured object or something. And that's what parsing is. That's what parsing allows you to do. Parsing just refers to the process of breaking down the HTML into its tiny little parts and then pulling out the shit that you want. So I want the text, I'm pulling it out. I want the pricing, I'm looking for stuff with a number sign, pulling it out. Or I'm looking for a specific element or tag or div or whatnot. Now, in the past, as you can imagine, this is pretty difficult, right? Like you used to have to create a ton of specific rules for literally every element. You had to, if you wanted to get like an email address, you had to like type an email address identifier. If you wanted to grab the pricing, you needed to like go and find the specific element or the division and then pump that in. These days, it's actually really easy, and you can do it 99% of the time just with AI. You literally just say, hey, extract this element. I'm going to show you in a second. Hey, extract this element, output only this element. Here's a whole website, and then it'll go and it'll find it for you. There's also a bunch of platforms out there, specifically one called Data for SEO, that make this a lot easier as well. They structure the outputs for you. And I'll walk through all of this over the course of the next little bit. But first, I'm going to drink my tea because I'm realizing that it's getting quite cold. Ooh, that is a zingy tea bag. All right, so now that we've covered all of this, let's actually go into scraping some sites live. Let me actually show you what this looks like. What we're going to do is we're going to use the HTTP module, just like I just did. And then we're going to do 3 examples. The first is we're going to scrape contact details from our website. So you have a big list of websites and you're trying to pull the email address of people at every single one of these websites. Well, you can actually do that yourself just by creating a little web scraper that takes you less than 5 minutes to do, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to feed a website into our make.com flow, and we're going to have our flow tell us something about the website. It's going to convert this big site into structured data using artificial intelligence. The value there is you can use the structured data in literally any other flow that you want. You can convert this into whatever type of structured data that you want. You could have it tell you the number of pages. You could have it tell you what the website is about. You could have it tell you the average price of the service, what the testimonials are about, what the testimonials say, what they're like, what sort of images are on the website. You could have it tell you all this stuff, basically. Then you could feed that into a flow, maybe to personalize some outreach to them, or maybe to do a competitor analysis and give you a quick lay of the land in 5 seconds or something like that. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a bunch of Fiverr listings. Fiverr is a very popular freelance platform, and I just want to show you how you can apply everything I'm going to show you today in make.com to like actually go out there and then scrape a bunch of Fiverr listings, which is a very like large tabular data, which then we can use to do cool stuff with. Like maybe you wanted to market to each of these Fiverr guys, or maybe you're making a new Fiverr profile and you wanted to, I don't know, like very quickly click a few buttons and then get a whole lay of the land again. So without further ado, let's jump back into our make.com scenario editor. As you see, I was playing around with this just before the video, and it's kind of messy and dirty, and I don't really like it, but I do need a few of these modules. What I'm going to do here first, I'm just going to delete this. I'm just going to delete that, and then that as well. And then our first example is going to be scraping contact details. So I'm going to call this one scraping contact details. Then our second example here is going to be, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Extracting structured data, right, which I've already done. And then the third one, let's just call this grabbing Fiverr listings. That looks good. Let's just call this scraping Fiverr. And then after I'm done this, I'm actually going to save this blueprint and give it all to y'all, so you know everything that I do. And you can just use this as like a training playground if you want to. All right, so what websites in particular are we going to scrape? Well, I was looking for a website that had contact details on it, and I just typed in Calgary Plumbing. Calgary is the name of the city that I live in. And I found like 20 websites very quickly using Google Maps. I literally just opened up the top 5 and the top 20, and something like 15 out of the 20 of them had contact details on them. So that's great. If you wanted to create a scraper, you can imagine how you could scrape the phone number really easily, or you could scrape the email address really easily. Obviously, we could do this manually. You could pay somebody in a lower cost of living country a few dollars an hour to go out and do this for you. But you could do it 100 times faster and probably with 100 times better data quality, honestly, if you just do it automatically. Not to mention it would be like basically free. You know, be the cost of ops, which in our case would probably be like 50 cents or something. So let me show you how not to just scrape data from this website, but how to scrape data from any website that you feed in that's static, that fulfills the parameters that I mentioned earlier. All right, so I'm going to go to our make scenario here called scraping contact details. And let me just exit out of this full screen mode so I can actually copy the URL. The URL of this website is Icon Plumbing. So I'm going to go over here, paste that in. The very first thing we're going to do is we're just going to run this. The reason why is because you should always run your HTTP request once to see what the data looks like, see if there are any gotchas, see if there's anything weird. A lot of the time, you'll see whether it's a static or dynamic website by doing this. And we can obviously put in rules later on that will like do this for us. But this looks like a very simple static website. You see there's tons of data here. There's metadata, right? There's the title of the website right over here in these title tags. If we were to scroll all the way down, there'd be a bunch of text and that sort of thing. Now, what we want is we want the email address, right? So basically, we want to take all this and we want to feed this in, and we want to grab this. The problem, though, is right now, this is a bunch of HTML. And there are two issues with this. One, it's really long. Like this is 24,051 characters. So if we wanted to use this in some flow, we'd have to consume 24,051 characters worth of that flow. This isn't a problem if it's like a parser, which I'll show you quickly in a moment. But if it's an AI, then that's a problem because it's 24,000 characters. It's going to cost us a fair amount every time we run this because of token usage. So the first thing that we want to do is we basically just want to take all the HTML away. And in order to do that, I'm going to go click on this orange module here and then click HTML to text. This is going to take in all of this ugly HTML, which again is not for humans, it's for machines. And it's just going to convert this into a bunch of text. And now basically what it's going to do is it's just going to give us a bunch of links, and these links are going to be in these brackets here. And then it's just going to give us a bunch of text. Our team, read our FAQs, giving back, plumbing. If we were to scroll all the way down here, you'll see that there's all of the text on the page. And most importantly, if we scroll even further down, you'll see that we have our email address. And the email address is put in twice just because they added a link to the email. So you can just give it a click and then open up your email. Then they also have the email address. Same thing with the phone number. So the question now becomes, how do I extract that? Well, there's a really simple and easy way. The first is AI. You could do this yourself in a few seconds. Again, I'm literally going to be building out a general purpose scraper for you that works on any static website to extract an email address, and I'm going to do it live. You could do this with AI literally just by clicking on your AI of choice. So I'm using Anthropic Claude right now because I find the quality is a little bit higher personally these days. This may be different by the time you're watching this. Maybe GPT-4 is back, or maybe there's some new model. I go to create a prompt over here. Then what I do is I'm just going to connect this. I pick Claude 3.5. I make the max tokens 4096. And then all I do is I say, hey, let me move this over here. Extract the email address from the following website data. Output only the email address. Your only token should be their email address, an @ symbol, and then their domain. You don't have to use this prompt. I just wanted to get this prompt right the first time because I'm not giving it any examples of what I'm looking for. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to feed in the text of the website. The system prompt is your helpful, intelligent web scraping assistant. You find emails and you don't output anything else. And that's it. Okay, so this is going to be extract email. I'm going to give this a run, and let's see what happened. You'll notice that this is the longest taking module here, but essentially we started with our HTML, right? Super long and ugly and not really meaningful to us. Then we went to this text parser, and we made it a little bit nicer to look at, but it's still not that great. What we want is we just want the email. And what you see is there's this text response variable in the output, which has the email that we're looking for, service@iconplumbing.ca. So what we could do is we could run this, and then what we could do is we could have, let's say, a big list of I don't know, instead of plumbers, let's just call this like websites. And then we could output the email address of every single one of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this Google Sheet just for example purposes for 2 or 3 of these. Is I'm going to feed in, instead of me doing this on a one-by-one basis, right? This is just for testing. I'm going to feed in a list of these, and I'm going to have Claude, find the contact details, and then I'm going to have it update that same spreadsheet. So the way to do this is I'm going to use the search rows module. Then I'm just going to map this to my specific Google Sheet, which I'm going to call big list of websites. Very fancy. Big list of websites. There we go. We're going to go sheet 1, and then that's that. I'm going to delete the filter, just click OK. Now, if I right click on this, press 1, sorry, I think there's an error because I closed it a little too fast. I'm a little too fast with my fingers here. Make sometimes needs a second. There you go. So I'm going to right click, press run this module only, and then, oh, sorry, I didn't actually put a website there. That's my bad. I'm going to go back over here. Put a URL in. And then why don't I go Calgary Plumbing again? Let's just see what other websites there were, because I need at least 2 websites, right? Otherwise, it's going to be sort of meaningless. Let's go Calgary Plumbing, and then why don't I go to Maps, and why don't I just pick like the first 3 plumbers? Let's go here. We'll go website, 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 website. Okay, so this is icon, right? Okay, we have another one here, Mr. Mike's Plumbing. Let's do that. So I'm just going to do this in the case of 2, but you can imagine how you could easily scale this up to the case of 30 or 40. You can also imagine how you could easily get another scraper to populate this and then use this to pump into our other web scraper and then, get us all the emails. So I just gave this a quick run just to make sure I could get the specific one I'm looking for. And now I'm going to change the maximum number of return rows to 2. And if I do this, it will then go through every single one of them. Now, the flow right now is going to scrape the contact details, parse the text, extract the email. But what I want to do is I want to update my row. Basically, I want to take the specific row and then I want to feed that email back in. So I'm going to go over here and then I'm going to call this big list of websites. I'm going to map the sheet as per usual. Looks like it's going to rain soon. That's unfortunate. It's going to go for a lovely walk. That ain't happening. We're going to put the row number in here. We're going to grab this row number from the first row. That way, if it gets a row for Icon Plumbing, when we update it, it's going to update the email address column. And then we're going to grab the text response from Claude. We're not going to change the URL. We don't need to update that. Okay, now we're going to run this twice. Okay, just ran once, updated the column. And if we go back here, we'll see that, why is it doing service at icon? Oh shit, sorry, I hard-coded the URL. My bad. Let's feed in the URL. Classic. All right, and we're going to do this one more time. All right, Icon Plumbing, and then general at Mr. Mike's Plumbing. All right, these are .ca because I'm in Canada, but yeah, these works for any sort of website out there. Now imagine if we filled in 100 of these, maybe we get like 50 email addresses. You've essentially just built something that people on the internet charge hundreds or maybe thousands of dollars for, if I'm being honest. And as you see, this is something that realistically you can build in 3 minutes or so. Very, very simple and straightforward. So I mentioned that this was AI and this was kind of costly. It was very easy to do and to set up, but it sort of costs a fair amount of money. How can we do this in the more general case? Well, I'll show you. The way that you do it in the more general case is instead of using AI, right? Maybe you use AI really quickly to determine, sorry, let me just unlink this, to determine whether or not the flow works. And then after you actually build a dedicated infrastructure for it. But the way that you do so is you use what's called a regex. I was about to say regex, but the last video where I talked about regex, I got shat on. People were like, it's regex, man. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm Canadian. Anyway, so a regex is just like it's a pattern matcher. And what it'll do is it will take in this whole string here and it will simply apply a couple of rules and it'll look for emails that are formatted like this. Something, an @ sign, something else, dot, something else. Now, I have one here that I've just validated works for the vast majority of domains I've tried it on. I've tried it on over 100 domains. I use this one basically every time I want to do this statically. So I'm just going to copy this and put this in the description as the email regex. But basically what's going to happen is I'm going to feed in the text from the previous module. And why don't we just run this as an example first before we update the row. And then it'll go through and it will do the exact same thing that we did before. It's just going to go one step further, and it'll also give us the name and then the domain. And the reason why I split this up in a name and domain in the regex, and you'll do it too, you'll get this too if you just use the same module, is by doing this, if this is a first name, I can pass this into AI and I can have it say, hey, check to see if this is somebody's first name. If it is, update the first name variable. So this way, I don't just get the email address. I also get one additional piece of data, which is their first name. Because a lot of people will sign off with their first name. Josh at Icon Plumbing, Peter at leftclick.ai, that sort of thing. Then when I put this into an email sequence, now I can say, hey, Peter. I don't have to say, hello, dear hiring manager, whatever. I think you guys get my point. So if you wanted to map this full flow out, I would just feed in this to the email address module. Then I'd run this thing one more time. And I mean, I didn't delete the email address, so it's not going to update, but I think you guys get my point. We just ran through the scenario one more time. Now, in order to do this magic module, you got to go to this orange section again, and then what you need is match pattern. This is the module that I selected up here, and this is the one that you'll need in order to make work. And basically, your regex, or this little code string, this goes up at the very top, and then the text that you supply goes down at the bottom. If you wanted to look for multiple instances of email addresses, let's say there's like 5 email addresses on a domain, then just go global match and turn that on. I was only looking for one, and I was comfortable stopping after the first, so that's where I stopped. All right, if you're still with me at this point, we've done something pretty miraculous and incredible in make.com, and it really took us just 5 or 10 minutes. I've shown you how to take a giant list of websites, iterate over those websites to grab the URLs, and then scrape those website HTML, scrape the HTML of those websites rather, feed that HTML into an HTML to text module, and then extract only the thing that we want from them. This system here is something that if you go on Upwork or Fiverr and you say, build me a system that scrapes company emails or whatever, this is basically the exact same system they're going to be building for you. They might just do it in code or they might do it in make.com, but it will not look as sexy as this. So we did something pretty cool here, but this is just the beginning of scraping because this is the simplest case. And this is one of the simplest things that we could do, which is to scrape contact details. Okay, why don't we kick this up a notch? As Gordon Ramsay says, why don't we just add a little bit of olive oil? And why don't we get some structured data from these websites instead? So what do I mean by structured data? Well, why don't we just actually use this Google Sheet? I wasn't planning on doing it, but that'd be pretty cool. Iterating over stuff is way better than just like hard coding it in, because this immediately shows you guys that you can apply this to other data sources, which is pretty sick. Okay, so what we're going to do in this instance is we're going to scrape the we're going to scrape the HTML of the website instead. Then what we're going to do is, instead of getting the contact details, we're going to try and get something about the site. We're going to have them tell us about them. We're going to have them give us a brief little summary, let's say, of what they do. And we can use that brief little summary later on in some sort of later on flow to maybe personalize some outreach, to tell us something about our competitors, that sort of deal. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to follow the exact same structure we did up here, where we have the HTML of the website, then we have a text parser to turn that into text, and then we're going to do something else, and then we're going to dump it back in our sheet. So I'm going to go over to my AI module, just somewhere around here. I guess I deleted it. Let's just use the same one we did to extract the emails. Instead of extract email, I'll say generate summary. And then if we're going to do this, we need to change the prompt. So I'm just going to dive in. Then what I'm going to say is, the following is text from a website scrape. In JSON, return a summary of the website. Well, I mean, we're probably not going to be able to do who because most websites don't have that name, but maybe like what the website does. Okay, why don't we do this? We'll say what the website does. And their key value props. return in this format. We're going to say description, and then we'll go double quotes. If you haven't seen my previous tutorial on JSON, I recommend it. And then we're going to do, maybe we'll just do description, and then we'll do value props. Then I'll just say value props go here, and then description goes here. The reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want it to like output a bunch of sub things, like a bunch of sub objects or whatnot. I'll say don't output anything but the JSON. Okay, great. And then I'm just going to feed in, if you think about it, I'm just going to feed in the, oh, geez, I forgot to parse the text, my bad. Let me go over here, grab this, paste that in. You guys are probably watching for the last minute with like a palm in your face. Okay, let's turn that into text first. Let's feed that in here. Okay, great. And then I'll say you're a helpful, intelligent web scraping assistant. You extract data and only output JSON. Awesome. Okay, now let's see how this works on our first example. We got to do a couple more things to make this flow functional, but I'm going to walk you through regardless. Okay, as we see here, we got a pretty intense or deep description of what's going on. And this looks good to me. Looks like they have 8 different value props. Honestly, a lot, but whatever. The thing is, sorry, I was zooming in and out so fast. This is in JSON format, and we want to convert this into a format that we can actually use. So to do this, what you need to do is click on this little button, type JSON, find that, and then use parse JSON. What you want to feed in as the input is this text response. This will parse it and turn it into mappable fields that we can use later on. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Let me unlink this. Let me click run. Now, instead of our output being text, our output is going to be a bunch of nicely structured JSON that we can massage and do whatever the heck we want with. See this? There's that nicely formatted JSON I was mentioning. Now what we can do is we can feed that back into our sheet. And then, I don't know, maybe instead of email, or why don't we do this? We'll do description, and then we'll do value propositions, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to take the same data, we're going to update the row number, which I grab here. And then we're not going to update email address. What we're going to update is we're going to grab description and then value props. Note that these don't have headers because I need to update the module, but I know that it's still column C and column D, right? Column C, column D. So the scenario is still going to work regardless. And what I want to do is I want to go back here and change the maximum number of return rows to 2 because I wanted to iterate over all of my data. Okay, let's give this a quick little run. Looks like we got number 1 done. And we got number 2 done. Wonderful. Now, I'm not going to stretch these out super wide, but I hope it's clear that we got descriptions of all these companies, and we also got the value propositions. And, we could do some better training of the model or better examples to avoid the fact that this one has a 1 in it and this one doesn't, right? This one's listing them sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one doesn't. This one isn't, but it's not that big of a deal as of right now. I think you guys get where I'm coming from, and that's the most important thing. All right, so that is number 2. Why don't we do number 3 now, which is to grab a bunch of Fiverr listings. Now, Fiverr seems pretty intimidating for a lot of people, right? I mean, I guess I already got it right over here because it's pretty big and pretty jam-packed freaking website, if I'm honest. A lot of people think that Make doesn't work for this. Well, I'll show you that it does. When I go to digital marketing here, I'm just going to click off. And let's just hypothetically say I want to scrape this digital marketing page. Why don't we go to social media marketing specifically? And we just want to get a bunch of these and then do something with them. So I'm going to give this a copy. And then I'm going to go back to scraping Fiverr. I'm just going to feed this in as the URL. And then I'm going to scrape this text. And then I'm going to use AI. And we're not using parsers here because I just want to be able to do this quickly. But you can imagine how you could build parsers to extract the various pieces of information that you wanted to. And let's see what sort of data we have here. I think we have the name. I think we have the, I don't know if we'll be able to grab the level. Can we grab the level? I don't think so because this level 2 is in a design or, oh, no. Okay, no, we actually can't grab level. So let's grab the name, the level, and let's grab the title and then the cost. Let's do that. So let's scrape all these. Name, the level of the freelancer, the title of the job, and the cost. Return in this format. We'll go name. Name goes here. We'll go level. We'll go level goes here. We'll go title. We'll go title goes here. And then we'll go cost. And then we'll go cost goes here. I think my JSON's right. I don't know for sure. So I'm going to go to JSON formatter, give this thing a little paste, and then I'm going to click format. Okay, looks good to me. I'm going to go back here and just make it look nice and pretty. And then as input, I'm going to feed in this text parser. So this is just sort of a little test. We're going to see how this works first. And I'm not going to attach it to a Google Sheet or anything. All I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the parse JSON module, attach it, and I'll just show you guys that you can do cool stuff with this data. And actually, why don't we also do one more thing? Let's set a variable too. We'll put that at the very end. For now, I'm just going to say x is equal to y. Okay, looks like sorry about that. I did not map the correct data because I haven't actually used this yet, and I mapped that, I think. No, I didn't. Need to map the text response here. Awesome. Let's give this king a little run through and see what happens. So we just scraped Fiverr. We got a 200 request, and we got a ton of HTML. It's very, very long, right? Odds are when I see HTML that's this long, I got what I needed. Okay, it looks like there was an issue here, but that's all right. The next thing is we converted all that to text. It's still hella long. The next thing is we generated a summary of that text. It looks like we only got one person, which kind of sucks. I think it's because the input was way too long. Yeah, so I think the input was a little too long. And we probably need to train this a little bit if we want to, 36,000 tokens. I'm going to be paying that bill pretty soon. It was so long that it actually screwed up and provided the JSON. So yeah, that's not very good. Okay, so when we scrape a data resource that's this long, what we basically need to do is we need to find a way to slice this data into subsections. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to find a way that I can slice this data, which is super crazy long, into subsections and then feed in that subsection iteratively into the thing that I'm looking for, okay? So let's see here. We got a bunch of categories. Okay, seller details. All right, sort by best. Okay, so first of all, we don't need anything above, we don't need anything above sort by best selling. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, and then I'm going to add another module here. Zoom this out a bit. I'll use the set variable module. And you know what? Let's actually do two set variable modules here. And first, I'm just going to call this split header. I'm going to feed this in, and then I'm just going to split this entire thing by this text, sort by best selling. So I'm going to feed in, oh, sorry, the name should not be this. This should just be, let's just say sellers. And then I'm going to split this by the text, sort by best selling. Now, I know this looks kind of weird right now, but in order to test this, I'm going to download the output bundles, copy all of this, and I'm just going to run this, paste in all of that text, and I'll just see if I can turn this into 2. Okay, great. I can turn this into 2. Notice how the second part is a lot easier. Wonderful. That looks pretty good to me. Now that I've done this, what we need to do, and let me actually just split into sellers, is I'm going to wrap this in a get. I'm only going to grab the second result of that array. And then I'm just going to add a second variable here just for simplicity. In reality, I would not actually normally do this. I would just do it all in one module. But what I'm going to do now that I have all of this is I'm going to look at the text. I'm going to look for a way that I could scrape this. Sorry, that I could separate this. It looks like there are 2 new lines here. And it looks like if I were to look for these new lines, there are 21 on this page. So I bet you if I were to split this whole thing, sellers, by new line, I would get 21 different results. Then for each of those 21 results, I would feed that into JSON. And then we should be able to get exactly what we're looking for here. Okay, let's give this a quick little try. And I actually don't need this. Okay. Give this a run and we'll see how our wonderful Fiverr scraper, which I developed in 5 minutes, is. 5 minutes for Fiverr. Looks like the source is not valid JSON. There's probably a reason why. Okay, no, the splitting didn't work actually. Why didn't the splitting work? That's interesting. We grabbed the data, which looks like it did work. Oh, I know why. It's because when you feed in new lines, it actually, into a set variable module, it actually parses them. This is a very much like a gotcha in Make. So you need to, instead of splitting by the \n, where the heck is this? You actually need to split by the presence of a new line. And I think I need to split by 2. I'm not sure. We're going to give it a try. I wonder how many times I could scrape Fiverr before they rate limit me. Okay, I had to take a little break there just to work out the logic, but just finish it up. I'm going to give it a quick run here. And we're just going to grab the first record so that we got an output. Okay, so essentially what I did was nothing changed to the scraping module, same thing. Nothing changed to the text parsing module, same thing. What I'm doing here is we're splitting the text, sorting by best selling, so nothing changed there. I'm then splitting these by the presence of a new line plus a new line. You don't actually need this plus, I find. I think Make just like inserted that for me. And then what I did is I changed the prompt here to a couple of things. One, I said, do not output anything but JSON. Your first token should be this. I also said if there are multiple records, return the first. This is just sort of a quick and dirty hack. You could also add a pre-step here where you pre-format multiple records into one record and then just iterate through them. And then I just gave it like one example of what I wanted to do. Basically, if you want AI to work for you, just give it an example. It'll eliminate 99% of the BS. So I gave it an example, then feeding in the split text, and then I changed the system prompt so it includes your first character is always that. What you end up with that is you'll feed in the text, and then you'll get an output in JSON as a result, which is quite nice. So we have it right there. And then when you feed that into the parse JSON module, right, just the pure text response, what you get is you get these variables, which then you can later use to, fill out a spreadsheet or something like that. So yeah, I can follow the exact same flow that I've done here with the Google Sheets. I'm not going to just for brevity, and I want to make sure this video isn't like 17 hours long, but I think you guys get my point. You can scrape more or less any data source that you want as long as it's static. You can scrape any data source you want with the HTTP request module as long as it's static. And it doesn't really matter how complex it is. We saw examples from getting like one piece of data from one website to getting, multiple pieces of data from, like a more grandiose, typically like secure website like Fiverr, which if you sort of think about it, like logically speaking, should be one of the highest security websites, just given the volume and that sort of thing. But that is static websites. If you made it up until this point, congratulations. We're now going to dive into dynamic websites, which are similar. They're really not that different. All we have to do is that initial scraping step where we get the HTML, like right over here. We just have to replace that module essentially, or we have to fill it in with some type of like API call to a service that does this for us. So, I mentioned that the majority of websites are static nowadays, and that's just because static websites are faster to load and typically less complicated for small to mid-sized businesses. If you are starting, I don't know, like a plumbing store, for instance, you're probably not going to go with some big dynamic single-page application. You're not going to need a bunch of database logic. You're not going to need to do any of that stuff. There are frameworks out there like Vue and React that do all this crap for you. There are frameworks out there like Next.js and Nux.js, which sort of just like do the static generation stuff for you if you have a coder doing it. If you're doing like WordPress nowadays, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of WordPress websites are rendered as static pages. Basically any other major website platform is going to be doing that, which is quite nice. The only real instance in which you need dynamic websites are usually when you're developing like some type of enterprise or big or like multi-million-dollar application, one where you really need to format the data that's coming in. You need to like have the rules of that HTML be different maybe for different users depending on different places in the world or depending on like a very short-term updates you want to make to your application with it displays and that sort of thing. So that's a mouthful, but essentially I just mean it's harder, but it's certainly doable. Your data source, instead of being the HTTP request module, is just going to be Apify, which is a third-party scraping tool, which I talk about quite often on this platform. I love it. It's amazing. They also give you $5 of like free trial credits, which last for me anyway for like the last couple of months. Or you can use hidden APIs. I've talked about hidden APIs in a previous video. I'm just going to like drop that and link that down below. I'm also going to mention this really quickly in the next module, in the next page. So, if you guys want more information on, if you want like a full guide just dedicated to hidden APIs, then check that out. Anywho, the rest of the flow is going to be the same. I got 2 examples here, similar to the 3 examples previously, where we had the icon plumbing, my own website, and then Fiverr. What I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be scraping these 2, crypto art and Bilibili. So I'm just going to open up crypto art over here, and I think you guys will kind of get the idea. It's an NFT art collection that tells the history of Ethereum. Very cool. Painting 9,893, all these blocks. Like, look, it's like a super deep art piece here, and you can, I guess, buy a bunch of these abstract geometric shapes and that sort of thing. I personally did not get into the NFT craze. I mean, calling it a craze, but I know a ton of people did make a ton of legit money on it. But I personally didn't really get into it, so my knowledge stops here. Looks pretty freaking cool. Let's hypothetically say we wanted to scrape this resource. How are we going to do it? Well, first things first, I'm going to just duplicate. Like, for the purposes of this, I'm just going to duplicate these 2. And I'll go down here. I'm going to call this for scraping, crypto art. And then I'm going to move the schedule here. I'll paste, oops, that's not what I want to do. I got to paste in this URL. I'm going to get it. And the reason I'm doing this is just to show you, if I right click and press run module only, this is what I get. So doc type HTML, blah, blah, blah. I get the title of the website, which is nice. I get the meta description, which is nice. But then I get basically absolutely nothing else. And this is more or less what's going to happen if you are loading a dynamically generated website like this. You're not going to get the stuff that you're looking for. You're just going to get a wrapper, right? You're just going to get like everything that goes around that HTML. So that's unfortunate. We can't actually scrape this. There's no real data here. Like, for instance, painting number 4. Like, if I look up painting number 4, there's no number 4 here. There's no text that represents that number 4, meaning that we just haven't gotten the HTML yet. Basically what happens is after you load this page, there's some JavaScript on the page. There's some function that calls that database or receives it. And then the code of the website is built. We don't really have that yet, which is why we can't access it. All right. So how exactly do you go about doing this with Apify? Well, it's pretty easy. Just go to apify.com. Sign in here. I got a free plan account with like $5 worth of tokens or something. Then go to store and then type in web scraper. That's the one that you want. And then what you want to do here is just type in the URL of the website. This is just an example, so I'll show you how to do it with one, and then we can talk about how to do it with multiple websites. And then you need a little bit of code in order for this to work. Like, if you want to store the page HTML, you do need some code. What I do is I just copied some code from another one. So I'm going to do this. And I'll say page HTML. So what you need to basically say const page HTML equals document.documentElement.outer HTML. What this is going to do is it's going to, in JavaScript, the document is just the entire object of the page instance. Document element is just a way to select a particular element on the page. And outer HTML is just the selector of the whole page's outer HTML. So that's the HTML including the HTML tag, which is important. And what we want to do is we just want to return this too. So I'm just going to go down here and then just go page HTML. This is now the function of the page. This is now going to run this code basically every time it works through what we want it to work through, which is pretty sick. So then all you do is you press start, and it's actually going to go out there and it's going to run the website and then deliver all of the code to us, which is pretty cool. When this happens, you're going to see the memory go from 0 to 4 gigabytes. That's totally normal. This is now just running the scraper, and you only have a certain number of amount of memory that's allotted to you. And so by doing this, Apify is just letting you know that, hey man, you got something going on right now. We're going to wait until it finishes. You then obviously have a bunch of console log things. So it's going through this. And then what we want to do is I'm going to go to output. We're going to do JSON. And then notice this item right here, HTML head, blah, blah, blah. This is the one that we want. So I'm just going to export both of these results in JSON. And I'm just going to, actually, I don't want to export the results. What am I doing? I'm just going to preview them all. Okay, and now if we type number 4, painting number 4. Now if we type number 4, notice how we actually get the painting number 4 that we didn't get before. This is just all the code for the whole website. So since we're outputting it here, we can now get it in make.com as well. Like, we're not limited to doing this in Apify. I just showed you how to do this manually in Apify, just to show you how this works. All you have to do is click on this little button, go to Apify, and then watch actor runs. That's what you're looking for. And then you do have to connect your hook. So you have to connect Apify to make.com. It's really simple. They have an API key. Just type in Apify API key. Actually, no, I don't even think you need the API key. Sorry, you literally just go here. No, you do. you go here, you click connection add, and then you add in your API token. Yeah, I just realized I don't have it. So let's actually do this for me. It's probably the best way to show you. Gonna want to copy this. And then actually, you know what? I'm going to add, oh, weird. I don't know if I have the ability to do this. Oh yeah, I can. This one's just going to be called like YouTube example, just so that I remember to change it or delete it later. I'm going to copy this, and then we're going to go back here. I'm just going to paste in. This is going to be called like Nick at left click. Okay, cool. Save. Wonderful, wonderful. And then we go to actor, and all I want is I want that web scraper that I had a second ago. So Apify web scraper, right? Give that a click, save. Now, the other thing you need to do is go to Apify, and then you need to get data set items. For whatever reason, Apify splits this into two different parts. There's the watch actor run, which is the trigger. And then this actually helps you get the specific items like the ones that we saw earlier. And in order to get this, just go to search items, type in dataset, and you want default dataset ID. Format JSON, limit 100, all that stuff is cool. And then now we can actually run our flow. I'm just going to go back into Apify for now, and then go to the specific actor in question, which is web scraper. I think I have some code here that like adds an extra example, so I'm not actually going to add that in, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I can just delete this and that should be fine. And basically what I'm doing right now is I'm running this manually. So I'm running this like myself, but you can also run this using Apify and JSON. What you would do is you would go over here, and then you'd go run an actor. Actually, first you'd run the actor. Maybe you do that in a different scenario. You know, so you'd go web scraper, and then you would go here to, where were we? Right here. And then you just copy all this JSON. You'd paste it in here. Oops, sorry. Should be good right here. And this is, I know this doesn't look very well formatted. We might be able to format this better if we go to JSON formatter. Let me see. Yeah, it doesn't really format it because of all these new lines, but that's all right. You feed this input JSON in, and then what you want is where it says cryptoart.io is where you'd feed in your list of URLs. And notice how this is an array in JSON. So all you would do is you just feed in a big list of URLs formatted just like this. Then you'd be able to run it. You run it in a different scenario, and then you catch it in this scenario. So I'm just going to catch it in this scenario for simplicity. But what I'm going to do is I'll watch the actor runs. I'll get the data set item. So I'm going to click go over here. I'll go save and start. And the same thing's going to happen. So on the left-hand side here where it says memory, you're going to see that it's going to go up to 4 gigabytes. And then it's going to go through that whole scraping procedure. I did remove a little bit of code. So just going to double check that that works. We may have like referenced the URL after or something. Yeah, it says 1 succeeded. If I go to output, I have the output here. What I'm doing now in make is I'm watching that actor run. Awesome, looks like it finished. And then in here, I got the page HTML in this page HTML object. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Now that we have it inside of make, what do? Well, it's pretty simple. Hella zooming. Gotta love the zoomies. We'll put this back here, and we'll feed in that page HTML item. Now, because I don't want to wait for this to run again, I'm just going to copy this whole thing. Oh boy, this is long as a hell. I'm just going to copy this whole thing just for the purposes of this demonstration. It's the exact same thing as if I just left this in here and ran it one more time. But I'm just going to, oh, actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to page HTML. Then I'm actually just going to hard code the dataset ID instead. That way I can still actually like run this module and it's not going to be total bullshit. Unlink, we'll go back here. Okay, now we're going to run this. And notice that now what we have is the exact same thing that we had before. We have like a text data essentially. So that's pretty valuable, as you can imagine. And now we can do whatever the heck we want with this. I don't really know what we want to do with this, if I'm honest. Maybe we just wanted to tell us something about the website again. So why don't we just copy these two here? And even though this is a dynamic website, right? It should only output JSON, but I guess we're going to find out. And then this 49 text response. Even though it's a dynamic website, we can now scrape it fully. So we don't have to worry about whatever happened. I received a couple, like one of the reasons I'm doing this video is because I received a couple questions on my last one. Like, hey, like for some reason when I do this, I don't see the HTML on the website. Well, this is how you do it. You can have two routes. You could theoretically, if you wanted to scrape any website, use this first route here, where you feed in the URLs, and then try getting the structured data using HTTP requests. And then if you end up getting data that's maybe less than a certain length, or maybe you feed this into AI and say, hey, is there HTML here? If no, then return no. If yes, then return yes. Then you just use a router and you'd split it into static website or dynamic website. If it's a dynamic website, then you run an Apify actor, and in another scenario, you catch the result and do what I just did over here. And that's how you go through the dynamic arm. You can also use a few other services for this. There's one called Data for SEO. Data for SEO is pretty good. In my community, everybody's now talking about it. People really, really love this stuff. And essentially the way that it works is, just going to close you, Nikita. Oops. So sorry, Nikita. We share the same name. How could I do this to you? Yeah, so this is just like a powerful API stack for SEO purposes. It'll basically allows you to run like what I just ran in Apify. I'm just doing it through one single module in make.com. It's reasonably straightforward. They have a little portal which you can access here. I'll just go back here. Where you have a certain balance. They give you like a free $1 or something like that. I apparently have like 5 years or 4.5 years left. And then all you need to do to connect this to Make is just go through their API documentation, which you can find inside of the Data for SEO module when you try and connect it. And then you just need to put in a username and password. Literally the simplest authentication I've ever seen in my life. And then the module that you want is you want parse page content right over here. And this is just another way to do the same thing, but you'll see the output is going to be a little bit different. So what's this website? CryptoArt. It's going to copy this URL, paste it in here. And you're just going to click emulate browser rendering yes. What you're going to see is when I run this, I'm not going to get the code of the page. I'm actually going to get the parse text already. It just sort of does both of these things in one. So I receive a tasks array, big ID, path. This is just the endpoint path. So v3/onpage/content parsing/live. Again, some APIs just return a ton of information to you, whether or not it's particularly relevant. Here's a bunch of data, and then here you have the result. The result is what matters. So we have an items array inside of the data, and we have a 1, and then page content. Jesus Lord, this is nested. What you want is the secondary topic. It's an array with 20 items, and this is just all of the data on the page that it found. So this is just the text data. It literally just goes and finds the text for you. You don't actually have to do the whole text HTML thing that I talked about earlier. The problem is you'll notice that this is buried in an array with 20 elements. You can actually cheat and just do all of this without having to iterate 20 times. The simplest way to do it, the one that I personally do, is I go to JSON and then I go transform to JSON. And what I'll do is I'll feed in the object that I want. And the object that I want is this page content element. And now if I run this, look at what happens. It's going to go grab the website. It's going to do the loading. And then voila, now I have a ton of HTML here instead. So this is the same thing, basically. Sorry, a ton of HTML, a ton of JSON instead. So now I have a bunch of JSON. And what can you do with the JSON? Well, now you can just feed all this stuff into AI just in one shot. So instead of having to iterate over 20 different elements and trying to extract data from each, now you just feed it into AI. You say, hey, here's a bunch of JSON from a website, from a website scraper, which does the parsing for us. Just like extract the following elements from it. Or you could try parsing it manually too, if you really wanted to. Presumably, I'm looking for something to do with painting. So here's the painting 1, painting 2. It's buried within an H_title object. You could do a lot with this, but I'm not going to hit the nail over the head 1,000,001 times. But okay, so that's how you do it with CryptoArt. How about this other website, Bilibili? Looks like Bilibili. I don't even know what language that is. Geez, I need to work on my Asian knowledge. I think that's Chinese. But I may be like offending like 250,000,000 people if it's Korean. I don't know. Probably more than 250,000,000 people. What's the population of Korea? It's really, really interesting. 51. That's it? 51 million? Why did I think there were so many more people living in Korea? Well, I guess that's South Korea. So with North Korea, it's 76. But anyway, whatever it is, a lot of the people on here like anime. And let's say you wanted to scrape that damn website. I'm going to copy this URL. We're going to go back here and we're just going to give this a try using one of these HTTP request modules. Also, let me just, name these scraping crypto art, I think. This one's also scraping crypto art. We'll just do like data for SEO. I'm just going to give you all of these modules. And this one here, I'm just going to use as an example to show you what happens when you try and scrape Bilibili without a like browser on-page automation. So I got a, browser, whatever the heck it's called, dynamic like web scraping service. So I just ran this, and then I got, if you scroll down here, I got a ton of website data, but you'll notice the vast majority of this is just like SVGs and stuff like that. I'm not actually getting like a lot of the text on the website that I want to get. Unfortunately, it's sort of dynamic, and it looks like I do get some card information here. And in hindsight, picking a service whose language I do not understand may or may not have been the best choice here, Nick. But that's okay. I'll show you how to do the exact same thing, assuming this is a dynamic website, just using Apify instead. As you can imagine, nothing different from what we've already done. Just going to copy all of this, paste all of this here. Okay, so scraping Bilibili. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to assume that we ran this in like another flow, and I'm just going to run this manually myself. So I'm going to go over here, grab the URL, paste the URL in here, and then I'm going to click Save and Start. It's now going to go through the website and find me some stuff. What I'm going to do while this is working, I'm just going to click Run Once because I really want to get the... Oh, sorry. You know what? I'm actually using the wrong dataset items. Ooh, that's rough. I'm using the hard-coded dataset items from the previous run. Is that going to be a problem? No, that's not going to be a problem. All right, so it's just running right now, and it just, I think it just finished, I believe. Not 100% sure. Yeah, it just finished. And if we go to output, we get a bunch of HTML on the website as well. So that's nice. What I want, just for the purposes of the demonstration, is I want this default dataset ID. I'm just going to go back here, and I'm just going to feed the default dataset ID. And I just want the most recent item, so I'm going to set limit to 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this example is I'm just going to generate a summary again, and I skipped ahead a bit just because I had some prompt finagling to do. The end prompt is I dragged in the Claude module here, and then it says the following is a text from a website. Scrape and JSON return a summary of the website, what they do, how they do it. Let's just do that. And the language. If the website is in another language, make sure to write the summary in English, return in this format. Then I have don't output anything but the JSON, because I like telling robots what to do, clearly. And I just clicked Run Once. It got the dataset items, and now it's going to generate the summary. And it gave me an example description here, along with the language, which may be useful if you're doing, I don't know, some type of parasite campaign where you're going to content in different languages and you're attempting to reproduce the content in another language. You can imagine how that might make sense for markets that are a lot less saturated than, let's say, the English or the Chinese markets. You know, I mean, how many people on planet Earth speak English, right? 400 million, 1.5 billion to 2 billion. And then there are 1.3 billion Chinese speakers. What if you tried to, I don't know, convert that into Vietnamese? Well, now you have 86 million people, which is, I don't know, 1/15 of English. So you could easily do like a parasite campaign where you're translating content on a website from Chinese or English to maybe Vietnamese or something, and then populating it on your own. You could also just have it, you could have it just translated word for word. You could have it tell you specifically about what page was posted the most recently. As you can imagine, there are like a million and one things that are possible, but that is how you scrape dynamic websites live. Hope you guys appreciated that tutorial. Really, really love the ability to scrape both static and dynamic. And I think that any like worthwhile web scraping solution is just going to have routes that handle both. So you're gonna have a route that handles, presumably static websites. And then if it doesn't work out, you can have that second like filter that allows you to call a dynamic service like this to do it instead for you. I wouldn't just scrape everything using this dynamic services simply because it'd probably be pretty cost prohibitive at higher operation counts, higher lists. That's okay. All right, the last thing I want to talk about to really make this a masterclass, I want to talk a little bit about hidden APIs. What are hidden APIs? Well, you know how right now we're scraping HTML. If you think about it, HTML is the output of some process. Specifically in the case of dynamic websites, essentially what happens is the dynamic website will go through that list of rules on the server, and it will use that to generate the HTML for us. Well, part of the list of rules will be like the data that it wants to show you. So maybe it's a directory website like Bilibili. Presumably, all of those fields are stored somewhere in a database anyway. And what's happening when you access bilibili.com is there's some function that goes out, calls the database elements, and then uses that to populate the HTML. Well, how cool would it be if you could just grab the database elements directly instead of having to do all this BS, you could literally just go out and then get everything in perfectly formatted JSON. I'll show you how to do so using an example. What I'm going to do is I'll do this in Loom, because Loom actually has a hidden API. This was just some roast that I did to one of the members of the community. As you see here, I was pretty freaking tired. Wow, I don't know if I've ever looked like that much of a douchebag. That's so funny. Anyway, so I'm going to hold Shift, Command, and C, or I'm going to right-click on the page and then press View Page Source. Oops, I lied. Right-click on the page and press Inspect. What Inspect is going to do is it's going to open up this menu on the right, these Chrome Dev Tools. We don't need this first page. What we need is we need the Network tab over here. Then what I want to do is I basically just want to refresh this page. I want to see what loads. What you'll notice what loads is a ton of these GraphQL calls. So basically every line here, this is a resource that is being grabbed using a network request. Just like our own HTTP request module earlier, our browser is making a ton of these little HTTP requests to other services. So I've gone to preview here and I'm just thumbing through all of the different resources, the files that we're getting. And you'll see that some of these files are JavaScript, some of these files are JSON, some of these files are HTML, some of these files are just data, right? We can just scroll all the way through here and there's just a million and one. What's interesting is what you'll find on a lot of websites is a lot of websites, when they call a resource, they'll receive a response that looks like this. And you'll notice that this is JSON, right? This is just JSON format. And a lot of the time, the things that they return in JSON, if you call an endpoint, so if you send a request to an endpoint, you can actually get it to return that JSON directly to like make.com instead of this. And it's like instead of your browser. I know that sounds a little bit complicated right now, but let me show you a practical example. I'm just thumbing through all these GraphQL requests because I'm noticing that these all have the JSON that I'm looking for. And it looks like most of them like send me organization data. That's cool. User followed stream, get workspace setting, home state density. That's pretty funny. They actually collect a ton of data on you. And it looks like they use this to communicate, honestly. They have some data on the video, which is pretty cool, with some comments. They have a list of comments. Fetch auto comment display controls, fetch video transcript. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to call this video transcript and I want to get the whole video transcript. We see what happens is when the page loads, it makes an HTTP request to this URL here called caption source URL. And if I paste this in, you'll see that I literally get the entire caption of my video. So you can imagine that this is a pretty useful thing to do. You could develop some app that uses the Loom API or something like that, Loom hidden API, and then use it to call this specific resource at this specific URL. But if I just copy this URL and then I go back here and I try and do like an HTTP request, let's see what happens. Just going to pump the URL in here with a get, press OK. I'm going to run. Okay, actually, we get the whole thing, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, that's pretty sick. Okay, so that's great. So literally, this URL here just has the list of all of our captions. So all we have to do now is we just have to reproduce the same request that resulted in this response. So in order to do that, go down to payload. And then what you do is you basically copy the entire structure of this request payload. And then what you also have to do is you go to headers here. And then you have to copy all of these headers down. And really the most important one here is this cookie. That's what you want. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to this URL and I'm going to set up a request here, calling the GraphQL. The request method is post. Let's go over here to post. If you guys don't know what I'm doing, by the way, feel free to check out my, my API call tutorial where I cover all of this. And then I'm going to go down here to, let's see, request header cookies, probably the main one. So I'm just going to go back here. I'll go to raw, JSON application JSON. Then I'll just, actually, it's probably a header, right? So I'm going to go to headers, go to cookie. I'll paste this in. That's usually all, honestly, that we really need. We may need some more data, actually. Let me just see here. Okay, let's give this a try, and if this doesn't work, then I'm just going to add the rest of the headers in here, but maybe it will. Then I need to send in some request content as well, so we'll go to payload, Then I'll view this source. Then I'm just going to copy this as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, press run this module once. Received a 200 status code. We have the data with the actual URL of the video that we want to access, which is pretty sweet. So I just got the transcript myself in make.com using Loom's hidden API. Now, if you think about it, what do you need in order to make this work? Well, you need a video ID. How do you get the video ID? Well, 3E3B, that's just my URL. So if you wanted to do like a cool project with this, I'm just like off the top of my head here, if anybody here spent more than 30 seconds thinking about this, you'd probably be able to come up with something better. But you could just, I don't know, you could scrape a big list of Loom URLs. Maybe there's just some resource out there with a big list of Looms. Or maybe Loom has its own repository with a big list of Looms, or maybe you have access to some giant database just filled with Looms or something like that. You feed in these URLs to make.com, you parse out the ID, you then have a module, like I just showed you, the HTTP request module, where you swap out this video ID with maybe a specific cookie or something like that, and then you use that to get the, essentially use that to get the video transcript every single time, which is pretty sweet. Let me see if there's an example Loom that maybe I can use. Hopefully Loom does its video supports using Looms. Let me see if maybe I have a Loom. Oh, you know what I could probably do? I'm just going to go to this URL here. I'll go site loom.com/share. Let's do that. Type this in, grab this video here, and what I want is I just want this ID. So I'm just finding a random video out on the internet, and I'm just double checking that I can do this with a video that isn't just mine, just to show you guys. And then what I need to feed in is this video ID right here. Paste that in, run this module only. And as you see, you can do this on literally any video, not just my own video. So now I have this person's whole video transcript, which is cool. You could then, I don't know, maybe you want to like feed that into some other flow, which turns that into some blog post or something. There's like a million, billion, trillion different things you can do, as I'm sure you could see. All right, so that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video tutorial masterclass on web scraping. I had a lot of fun putting it together. I think this thoroughly irons some of the holes in my last video, which discussed specifically web scraping on a static basis. This is now web scraping dynamically, which means you can do basically anything. And then hidden APIs are part of web scraping, which is why I cover them in so much detail. But if you guys want more, I actually have a whole video where I just like run through hidden APIs, how they work, and more or less what I showed you here, just in a little bit more detail. So yeah, web scraping is a really deep topic, but what I just showed you was the 80-20. You can use it to determine more or less anything that you want. You can use it to get any sort of static website, summarize that data, turn that data into something valuable, scrape certain entries, scrape URLs, and then ultimately like call GraphQL hidden APIs or other hidden APIs to receive things that are valuable like video transcripts. If you guys have any questions about what I showed, feel free to drop a comment down below. I know some of this was a little bit dense, particularly near the end. Otherwise, if you could all do me a favor and like, subscribe, do all that fun YouTube stuff to help me out and get me to the top of the algo. And I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.